The cargo docks of Kirvosh station smelled like burnt metal and ozone. Tarek wiped the grease from his hands onto his already filthy coveralls and squinted up at the massive Drathan warship hovering in the docking bay. The vessel was a monument to intimidation. Sleek black hull plating, angular weapon arrays jutting out like the spines of some predatory beast, and thrusters that glowed with a sickly purple luminescence. He hated working on Drathan ships, not because they were difficult to repair, though they were, but because of the way the Drathans treated him. To them, Tarek was less than nothing, a speck of organic refuse that happened to have opposable thumbs and a knack for fixing things they couldn't be bothered to understand. Human. The voice cracked through the hangar like a whip. Where is the diagnostic on the port thruster assembly? Tarek turned slowly, his jaw tight. The Drathan officer stalking toward him stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh dock lights. His forearms were crossed in a posture of supreme irritation, and his compound eyes reflected Tarek's small, grease-stained form 100 times over. "Still running, Officer Krath," Tarek said evenly. "Your thruster housing has a fractured plasma regulator. It'll take another hour to—" "Another hour?" Krath's mandibles clicked in disgust. "Unacceptable. The Emperor's convoy arrives in 30 minutes. If this ship is not flight-ready, I will have you scrubbing coolant tanks with your tongue." Tarek forced himself to nod. "Understood." Krath leaned down, bringing his face close enough that Tarek could smell the acrid chemical scent of his breath. "You humans are fortunate the Empire permits your existence at all. Your world contributes nothing but cheap labor and mediocrity. Remember that." The officer turned sharply and marched away, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hangar. Tarek stood there for a moment, fists clenched at his sides, breathing slowly through his nose. He'd heard variations of that speech 1,000 times. Every Drathan on this station believed it. Humans were inferior, weak, barely sentient. He returned to the thruster assembly, his hands moving automatically through the repair sequence. The work was meditative in a way. His mind could drift while his fingers found the broken connections, rerouted power conduits, replaced burnt-out coils. He'd been doing this for 3 years now, ever since he'd signed the labor contract that promised decent pay and a chance to see the galaxy. What a joke that had been. The galaxy he'd seen so far consisted of this station, this hangar, and the occasional trip to the lower quarters where humans and other lesser species were housed. The pay was enough to keep him fed, but not enough to buy passage off-world. He was trapped here just like the other 47 humans working maintenance on Kirvosh. A soft chime sounded from his wrist communicator. Tarek glanced down at the holographic display. A message from his supervisor, a hulking Drathan named Vector. "Report to Bay 7 immediately. Priority assignment." Tarek frowned. Bay 7 was the high-security zone, reserved for Imperial vessels and classified cargo. He'd never been assigned there before. His clearance level didn't even grant him access. He sealed up the thruster assembly. It would hold for now, and made his way through the labyrinthine corridors of the station. Kirvosh was a sprawling orbital platform, a transit hub where ships from across the Drathan Empire stopped to refuel, resupply, and transfer cargo. It was also a fortress, bristling with defense turrets and patrolled by Drathan soldiers in full combat armor. As Tarek approached Bay 7, 2 guards stepped forward, their plasma rifles held at the ready. He raised his hand slowly. "Tarek Voss, Maintenance Division," he said. "I was summoned." One of the guards scanned his wrist communicator, then grunted. "You're cleared, barely. Touch nothing except what you're told to touch." "Understood." "Understood." The massive blast doors slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. Tarek stepped inside and stopped cold. The bay was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the standard docking areas, and it was filled with ships unlike anything he'd ever seen. They were transport vessels, but not for cargo or passengers. Each one was designed like a prison, with reinforced hulls and containment fields glowing across their surfaces. Through the translucent energy barriers, Tarek could see shapes moving, large, hulking forms that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light. Ah, the human mechanic. Vector's voice rumbled from behind him. Tarek turned to face his supervisor, who towered over him like a living tank. "You will perform maintenance on transport vessel Theta 9. The containment systems are malfunctioning." "What's in those ships?" Tarek asked before he could stop himself. Vector's eyes narrowed. "That is not your concern. Your concern is ensuring the containment fields remain active. If they fail, you will die screaming. If you speak of what you see here to anyone, you will die slowly. Am I clear?" "Crystal." "Good." Vector gestured toward one of the transports. Theta 9, you have 2 hours. Tarek approached the designated vessel cautiously. The hull was dark, almost lightless, and the air around it felt wrong, charged with something that made the hair on his arms stand up. He climbed the external maintenance ladder and accessed the control panel near the primary hatch. The diagnostics were a mess. Power fluctuations, neural interface errors, biometric anomalies. Whatever was inside this ship, it was alive, and it was suffering. Tarek hesitated, then overrode the privacy lock on the internal camera feeds. His tablet flickered, and an image appeared that made his breath catch in his throat. Inside the containment chamber, chained to the walls by thick neural cables, was a creature that defied description. It was humanoid in shape, but massive, easily 10 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be part organic, part machine. Its skin was a mottled grey, covered in scars and metal plating that had been fused directly to its flesh. Its face was hidden behind a featureless helmet, but Tarek could see its chest rising and falling in labored breaths, and then it moved. Not violently, not aggressively. It simply turned its head, as if sensing it was being watched. Tarek couldn't see its eyes, but he felt them on him through the camera feed, felt the weight of its gaze, the depth of its exhaustion. This wasn't a weapon. This was a prisoner. Tarek's hands trembled as he scrolled through the ship's logs. Most of the files were encrypted, but he managed to access a fragment of a report. Sentinels, biomechanical enforcement units, neural override protocol active, obedience absolute, pain compliance at 97% efficiency. His stomach turned. These creatures, these sentinels, were slaves, living beings forced into obedience through torture. He thought of Officer Krath's words. You humans are fortunate the Empire permits your existence at all. Tarek looked back at the camera feed, at the sentinel chained inside. He didn't know what it had been before the Empire got hold of it. He didn't know if it had a name, a family, a life. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was wrong, and someone had to do something about it. He closed the diagnostic panel and began his work, his mind already racing with possibilities. If the containment systems were malfunctioning, that meant the neural override protocols were vulnerable. If he could access the right systems, if he could learn how they worked, maybe he could set them free. It was a stupid idea, suicidal even. But as Tarek worked in the cold shadow of the Imperial transport, under the twin suns of a system he'd never see, he made a choice. He wasn't going to be dust under their boots anymore, not if he could help it. Tarek spent the next 3 days studying everything he could about the Sentinels without raising suspicion. It wasn't easy. The Imperial databases were locked behind encryption protocols that would take a lifetime to crack, and asking questions would only get him killed. But he had something the Drathans didn't expect from a human mechanic: patience, and an understanding of systems that went beyond what his clearance level suggested. He'd learned long ago that the most valuable skill in a place like Kirvosh wasn't strength or intelligence. It was invisibility. Be quiet, be useful, and people stopped seeing you. They talked over you, around you, as if you were just another piece of equipment in the room. That's how he learned about the Emperor's arrival. Tarek was running a diagnostic on a secondary docking clamp when 2 Drathan officers passed by, their voices carrying in the empty corridor. The Emperor himself, coming here, one said, his tone equal parts awe and nervousness. For what purpose? To inspect the Sentinels before the assault on the Korvax sector, the other replied. He wants to ensure they are ready. 30 Sentinels, all prepared for deployment. They say the Emperor can command them with a thought. Terrifying creatures. I've heard they can tear through reinforced bulkheads with their bare hands. Indeed, and they feel nothing. No fear, no hesitation. The perfect soldiers. The officers moved on, their conversation fading into the distance. Tarek remained perfectly still, his mind racing. 30 Sentinels, all housed here on Kirvosh, waiting for the Emperor's inspection. If Zaltharan himself was coming, security would be tripled. Any chance of accessing the containment systems would vanish. He had to act now. That night after his shift ended, Tarek didn't return to the human quarters. Instead, he made his way back to Bay 7, using a maintenance access tunnel that ran beneath the primary corridors. It was a tight squeeze, barely wide enough for his shoulders, but it brought him to a service hatch that opened directly into the bay's lower level. He waited until the patrol passed, then slipped through the hatch and into the shadows beneath the transport vessels. The bay was dimly lit at night, with only emergency lighting casting long, harsh shadows across the floor. The containment fields hummed softly, a constant background drone that set his teeth on edge. Tarek had memorized the layout during his first visit. Theta 9 was the third vessel from the left. He crept toward it, staying low, every nerve in his body screaming that this was insane. If he was caught here, there would be no trial, no mercy, just a quick death if he was lucky. He reached the maintenance ladder and climbed silently, his hands slick with sweat despite the cold air. At the top, he accessed the external control panel and plugged in his tablet. The screen flickered to life, displaying the ship's systems in a cascade of data. Neural override protocols, pain compliance matrices, behavioral inhibitors. It was all there, laid out in clinical detail. The Sentinels were controlled through implants embedded directly into their brainstems, devices that delivered excruciating pain whenever they deviated from their programming. Disobedience was punished instantly. Hesitation was punished. Even thoughts that contradicted their orders triggered the implants. Tarek felt sick. He navigated deeper into the code, searching for vulnerabilities. The system was brutal but not perfect. The implants required constant calibration to account for neural adaptation. The Sentinels' brains were fighting back, trying to root around the pain centers, trying to reclaim control. The Empire's solution was to recalibrate every 72 hours, resetting the neural pathways and reinforcing the override. But that meant there was a window, a brief period after each recalibration, where the implants were in a semi-dormant state, running diagnostics and resyncing with the host nervous system. During that window, the Sentinels were still obedient, but the pain compliance was reduced to minimal levels. If he could extend that window, if he could introduce a delay into the recalibration sequence, he could give them time to think, time to feel something other than agony. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was a crack in the chains. Tarek's fingers flew across the tablet, modifying the code with surgical precision. He couldn't shut the system down entirely, that would trigger immediate alarms, but he could introduce a subtle error, a cascading delay that would stretch the diagnostic window from minutes to hours, maybe even days if he was lucky. He finished the modification and uploaded it to Theta 9 systems. The progress bar crawled across the screen, agonizingly slow. 10%, 20, 30. A sound behind him made him freeze. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Not the sharp clicks of Drathan boots, but something else, something heavier. Tarek turned slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. The Sentinel stood at the base of the ladder, looking up at him. It had somehow escaped its containment chamber, or been released, and now it stood in the open bay, silent and still. The neural cables that had been attached to its helmet hung loose, sparking faintly. Its featureless mask reflected the emergency lights, giving no hint of what lay beneath. Tarek couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He waited for the creature to attack, to fulfill whatever violent programming drove it. But it didn't move. Instead, it raised one massive hand and pointed, not at Tarek, but at the tablet in his hands. Tarek's throat was dry. You know what I'm doing." The Sentinel didn't respond. Couldn't respond, Tarek realized. Its vocal systems had probably been removed or disabled, but it nodded, a single slow movement of its head. "You want me to keep going?" Tarek whispered. Another nod. The upload bar reached 100%. Tarek pulled the tablet free and stared down at the Sentinel. The creature turned and walked back toward its transport vessel, moving with surprising quiet for something so large. It climbed back into its containment chamber and stood there waiting for the neural cables to reattach. Before the system could fully reactivate, the Sentinel looked back at Tarek one last time, and though it had no face he could see, Tarek felt the weight of its gratitude. Then the cables snapped into place and the creature went rigid, its body locked into obedient stillness once more. Tarek climbed down the ladder on shaking legs. He didn't know how the Sentinel had broken free, even temporarily. Perhaps the malfunctioning containment field had given it a moment of autonomy. Perhaps the Empire's control wasn't as absolute as they claimed. Either way, he had his answer. The Sentinels were still in there, still aware, still fighting, and now they knew someone was fighting for them. Over the next 2 days, Tarek repeated the process on every transport vessel in Bay 7. Each time he refined the code, made it harder to detect. He worked during his assigned maintenance shifts, moving quickly, always watching for patrols. Twice, he nearly got caught. Once, a guard passed within 5 feet of where he crouched beneath a vessel, his tablet hidden against his chest. But he finished. All 30 Sentinels now had the modified code in their neural override systems. The recalibration windows were extended. It wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the Drathan technicians would notice the anomaly. But for now, the Sentinels had breathing room. Tarek returned to the human quarters that night exhausted, his hands trembling from adrenaline. He collapsed onto his bunk and stared at the ceiling, wondering if he'd just signed his own death warrant. The next morning, the alarms sounded. The Emperor had arrived. Tarek stood with the rest of the maintenance crews in the hangar, forced to witness the spectacle. The Imperial flagship descended into Kirvosh's main docking bay like a falling cathedral, massive, ornate, bristling with weapons and shields. The ramp lowered, and Emperor Zaltharan himself emerged, flanked by his personal guard. Zaltharan was unlike any Drathan Tarek had seen. His exoskeleton was reinforced with gold plating, etched with intricate symbols of power. His forearms each held a ceremonial weapon: blade, staff, scepter, and whip. His compound eyes gleamed with an intelligence that was both ancient and ruthless. The assembled officers dropped to their knees. Tarek and the other humans followed suit, pressing their foreheads to the cold metal floor. "Rise," the Emperor commanded, his voice carrying across the hangar without amplification. "I have come to inspect my Sentinels. They will lead the assault on the Korvax. They will crush resistance. They will bring obedience." Zaltharan turned toward Bay 7 and the entire procession followed. Tarek's pulse thundered in his ears. The Emperor was going to see the Sentinels, see what Tarek had done, and when he did, everything would burn. But as the Emperor's entourage disappeared into the bay, Tarek felt something strange settle over him. Not fear, not resignation, defiance. He'd made his choice. Now he would see it through, whatever the cost. Because someone had to stand up to the Empire. Even if it was just a human mechanic who smelled like grease and oil, even if it changed nothing, he had to try. Tarek wasn't permitted inside Bay 7 during the Emperor's inspection, but he didn't need to be. He could hear everything through the maintenance tunnels, the Emperor's voice echoing off the walls, the nervous responses of his officers, and beneath it all, the low hum of the containment fields. He pressed his ear against the cold metal of the ventilation grate and listened. "Magnificent," Emperor Zaltharan said, his voice rich with satisfaction. 30 instruments of absolute obedience. Show me their response time." There was a pause, then the sharp voice of an officer. "Sentinel Unit 7, step forward." Through the grate, Tarek could see slivers of movement. One of the Sentinels moved from its containment field, its massive form crossing the bay floor with mechanical precision. It stopped exactly 3 paces from the Emperor and stood at attention. "Kneel," Zaltharan commanded. The Sentinel knelt immediately. "Stand, turn, raise your right arm, lower it, excellent." The Emperor circled the creature slowly, examining it like one might inspect a piece of machinery. "And the pain compliance remains at optimal levels." "Yes, Your Majesty," another officer responded. "All units are fully synchronized. Their neural implants are functioning perfectly. They will obey without question, without hesitation, without mercy." Zaltharan stopped in front of the Sentinel and leaned close. "Tell me, creature, if I ordered you to tear apart your own limbs, would you do it?" The Sentinel remained motionless. It couldn't speak. Its vocal cords had been destroyed during the conversion process, but it nodded once, a movement so small it was barely perceptible. The Emperor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Perfect, absolutely perfect. The Korvax will fall within a week once we deploy these units. Their rebellion will be crushed and their worlds will be added to the Empire." "Your Majesty," a technician's voice interrupted nervously. "I'm detecting some irregularities in the recalibration schedules, minor timing discrepancies across several units." Tarek's blood turned to ice. "Irregularities?" The Emperor's tone shifted, dangerous now. "Explain." "The neural override protocols are functioning normally, but the diagnostic windows are extended by several hours in some cases. It doesn't affect obedience, but it's outside standard parameters." "Who has accessed these systems?" "Only authorized maintenance personnel, Your Majesty. The logs show routine repairs over the past week. Nothing unusual." "Nothing unusual," Zaltharan repeated slowly. "And yet you describe an irregularity. Who performed these repairs?" There was a pause. Tarek could hear the technicians scrolling through data. "Multiple personnel, Your Majesty. Primarily a human. Designation Tarek Voss. Maintenance Division." The silence that followed was suffocating. "A human." The Emperor's voice was soft now, which was somehow worse than if he'd been shouting. "A human has been tampering with my Sentinels. Bring him to me, now." Tarek didn't wait to hear more. He pulled back from the grate and ran, his footsteps echoing through the maintenance tunnel. His mind raced through possibilities. He could try to reach the human quarters, hide among the others. He could try to access an escape pod, steal a shuttle. The tunnel ahead of him filled with light. Guards poured in from both ends, their plasma rifles trained on him. There was nowhere to go. "Tarek Voss," one of the guards said, "you are summoned before Emperor Zaltharan. Comply immediately, or be terminated." Tarek raised his hands slowly. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his voice came out steady. "I'll comply." They dragged him out of the tunnel and into Bay 7. The space seemed even larger now, filled with Drathan officers and Imperial guards. The 30 Sentinels stood in perfect rows, motionless as statues, their containment fields deactivated for the inspection. And in the center of it all stood Emperor Zaltharan. The guards forced Tarek to his knees. He kept his eyes down, focusing on the polished floor. His reflection stared back at him, small, filthy, insignificant. "Look at me, human." Tarek raised his eyes. Zaltharan towered over him, his golden exoskeleton catching the light, his compound eyes fixed on Tarek with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. "You have tampered with Imperial property," the Emperor said. "Property that represents decades of research, billions in resources, and the future of this empire's military supremacy. Do you understand the magnitude of your crime?" "Yes," Tarek said quietly. "Then you understand that your death will be neither quick nor merciful. You will serve as an example to every lesser species in this empire. No one defies Zaltharan. No one sabotages my weapons. No one—" "They're not weapons," Tarek interrupted. The entire bay went silent. Every Drathan present seemed to freeze, shocked that a human had dared to speak without permission. Zaltharan's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of profound displeasure. "What did you say?" Tarek swallowed hard, but he met the Emperor's gaze. "I said they're not weapons. They're people, living beings. You've enslaved them, tortured them, turned them into something they never wanted to be." "People?" Zaltharan laughed, the sound echoing off the walls. "You think these creatures are people? They are tools, resources, no different from the ships they will board or the weapons they will wield." "They think," Tarek said. "They feel. I've seen it. They're still in there, still aware of what's been done to them. And you know it. That's why you need the pain compliance systems. Because if you didn't hurt them constantly, they'd stop obeying you." The Emperor's amusement vanished. He reached down with one of his 4 hands and grabbed Tarek by the throat, lifting him off the ground effortlessly. Tarek's feet kicked in the air as his windpipe compressed. "You are nothing," Zaltharan hissed. "Your species is nothing. You exist because the Empire permits it. Your world contributes nothing but cheap labor and resources. And yet you dare to lecture me about morality? About the nature of consciousness?" Black spots danced at the edges of Tarek's vision. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, but he refused to look away. "I should kill you now," the Emperor continued, "but I think a better demonstration is in order. Sentinel Unit 7, step forward." The Emperor released Tarek, who collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Through his blurred vision, he saw the Sentinel approach, moving with that same mechanical precision. "Sentinel Unit 7, Zaltharan commanded. "This human claims you are a person, that you possess will and consciousness. If that were true, you would refuse my next order. You would show mercy." The Emperor smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Kill the human. Slowly." The Sentinel stood over Tarek, its massive hands flexing. Tarek looked up at the featureless mask, at his own terrified reflection in its surface. He thought about the nod the Sentinel had given him days ago, the silent gratitude, the awareness behind the mask. But he also knew the reality. The pain compliance systems were still active. Even with the extended diagnostic windows, the implants could still punish disobedience. And disobeying a direct order from the Emperor would trigger the maximum response, pain so intense it could cause brain damage or death. He couldn't ask them to suffer that, not for him. "It's okay," Tarek whispered, his voice hoarse. "I understand. Do what you have to do." The Sentinel reached down, its hands moving toward Tarek's neck. The entire bay watched in silence. Zaltharan's smile widened, and then the Sentinel stopped. Its hands hovered inches from Tarek's throat, trembling, not with aggression but with something else, resistance. Its whole body began to shake, servos grinding, metal plating creaking under strain. "Sentinel Unit 7, the Emperor's voice turned cold. "I gave you an order. Comply immediately." The Sentinel's head turned slowly towards Zaltharan, Even through the mask, Tarek could sense its defiance. "Impossible," one of the technicians breathed. "The implant should be forcing compliance. The pain levels should be—" The Sentinel took a step back from Tarek, then another. It stood between him and the Emperor, its massive frame a shield. Zaltharan's expression twisted with rage. "Override protocol, maximum pain compliance, all units." Throughout the bay, the Sentinels began to convulse. The neural implants activated at full power, flooding their systems with agony. Several fell to their knees. Others remained standing through sheer force of will, their bodies locked in spasms of pain, but none of them moved toward Tarek. And Sentinel Unit 7, despite the torture coursing through its nervous system, despite the implant trying to burn through its brainstem, remained standing, protecting him. "What have you done?" Zaltharan roared, rounding on Tarek. "What did you do to them?" Tarek pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaking. "I gave them time. Time to remember who they were before you broke them. Time to feel something other than pain." He looked at the Sentinels, at their trembling forms, and felt tears burn his eyes. "I gave them a choice." The Emperor's hand shot out, seizing Tarek by the skull. "Then you have given them death, and yourself along with them." He turned to his guards. "Activate the failsafes. If they will not obey, they will be terminated. All of them. And bring me the detonation controls for this human's homeworld. If one human can cause this much damage, then humanity itself is too dangerous to exist." Tarek's world spun. "No, no, you can't. I am Emperor Zaltharan. I can do anything I wish." But before the guards could move, Sentinel Unit 7 did something no one expected. It reached up and tore the helmet from its own head. The mask clattered to the floor, revealing a face. Not a monster, not a machine, a person. Scarred, exhausted, bearing the marks of unimaginable suffering. Its eyes, organic, human-like, met Tarek's with an expression that transcended species. Gratitude, determination, and hope. Then it turned those eyes on the Emperor, and everyone in the bay saw what Tarek had known all along. The Sentinels were still people, and people could only be pushed so far before they pushed back. The rebellion had begun. The moment Sentinel Unit 7 removed its helmet, the bay erupted into chaos. "Terminate them!" Emperor Zaltharan's voice cut through the confusion like a blade. "Activate all failsafes, now!" The Drathan technicians scrambled to their consoles, fingers flying across holographic interfaces. Throughout Bay 7, red lights began to flash as the termination protocols engaged. The neural implants in the Sentinels' heads were designed with one final function. If control was lost, they could be detonated remotely, killing the host instantly. But Tarek's modifications had bought them precious seconds. The extended diagnostic windows meant the implants were running slower, their systems desynchronized. The termination signal propagated through the network, but it stuttered, delayed by microseconds that stretched into moments, and moments were all the Sentinels needed. Unit 7 moved first. Despite the pain still coursing through its body, despite the implant threatening to burn through its brain, it lunged forward with impossible speed. Its massive hand caught an Imperial guard mid-reach for his plasma rifle. The guard's scream was cut short as Unit 7 hurled him across the bay, his armored body crashing into a control console in a shower of sparks. The other Sentinels followed. 30 enslaved soldiers, their chains breaking in real time, turned on their captors. The bay became a war zone. "Protect the Emperor," an officer shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of metal tearing and weapons fire. Tarek hit the ground as plasma bolts seared the air above him. He crawled toward the nearest piece of cover, a cargo container that had been knocked over in the chaos. His mind raced. This wasn't what he'd planned. He'd wanted to free them quietly, to find a way to disable the implants without triggering a massacre. But the Emperor had forced their hand, and now everyone in this bay was going to die unless— "Human!" A hand grabbed his shoulder, and Tarek spun to find Unit 7 crouching beside him. Up close, without the helmet, he could see the full extent of what had been done to it. The scars, the metal plating fused to bone, the ports where neural cables had been jacked directly into its spine. But he could also see intelligence in those eyes, and something that looked like desperation. Unit 7 pointed to the main console across the bay, then mimed typing. "You want me to access the systems?" Tarek asked. A nod. "I don't have clearance. I can't shut down the fail-safes from here." Unit 7 grabbed a plasma rifle from a fallen guard and thrust it into Tarek's hands. Then it pointed again, more insistently. The message was clear. It would get him there. He had to do the rest. Tarek gripped the rifle, his hands shaking. He'd never fired a weapon in his life. He was a mechanic, not a soldier. But as he looked around at the Sentinels fighting for their lives, fighting for a freedom they'd been denied for years, he realized he didn't have a choice. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." Unit 7 rose to its full height and charged across the bay using its body as a shield. Tarek ran behind it, trying not to think about the plasma bolts that slammed into Unit 7's armored back. The Sentinel didn't slow down, didn't flinch. It simply kept moving forward, clearing a path through the guards and officers that stood between Tarek and the console. They were 20 feet away when Emperor Drathan himself stepped into their path. The Emperor had drawn 2 of his ceremonial weapons, a curved blade in one hand, a crackling energy whip in another. His other 2 hands gestured sharply, and the air around him shimmered with a personal shield. He looked at Unit 7 with something beyond rage. It was betrayal, as if a favored tool had suddenly turned in his hand. "You were mine," Drathan said, his voice low and venomous. "I created you. I gave you purpose. And this is how you repay me?" Unit 7 didn't respond, couldn't respond, but it positioned itself between Tarek and the Emperor, its stance protective. "Move," Drathan commanded. "I will kill the human, and then I will kill you. But it will be slow. You will beg for the obedience you once knew." Unit 7 shook its head, slowly, deliberately. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. So be it. He moved with a speed that defied his size, the whip lashing out in a blur. It caught Unit 7 across the chest, the energy field burning through metal and flesh. The Sentinel staggered but didn't fall. It swung a massive fist, but Drathan was already gone, dancing aside with practiced ease. The blade came next, carving a line down Unit 7's arm. Tarek raised the plasma rifle, trying to find a shot, but the Emperor's shield deflected everything. He was untouchable, a predator playing with wounded prey. "You cannot win," Drathan said, circling Unit 7. "Even without the implants, you are damaged. Broken, you are nothing but a failed experiment." Unit 7 lunged again, and this time the Emperor's blade found its target, sinking deep into the Sentinel's shoulder. Unit 7 roared, a sound that came from somewhere deep and primal, a sound that hadn't been heard from its throat in years. And then something changed. Throughout the bay, the other Sentinels stopped fighting. One by one, they turned toward the Emperor, toward Unit 7. They felt what was happening. The connection between them, forged through shared suffering, was still there, and it was stronger than any neural implant. They moved as one. Drathan saw them coming and tried to retreat, but there were too many. The Sentinels surrounded him, their combined mass forming a living wall. The Emperor's shield flickered under the barrage of blows, each impact draining its power. He fought back with everything he had, his weapons carving through flesh and metal, but for every Sentinel that fell, 2 more took its place. "No!" Drathan shouted. "I am your Emperor. I am your creator. You will obey me." But they didn't obey. They remembered. They remembered who they'd been before the Empire took them, before the torture and the chains and the forced obedience. They remembered families, homes, names that had been stripped away, and they remembered every moment of pain, every order they'd been forced to follow, every life they'd been made to take. The shield collapsed. Drathan stumbled backward, his weapons falling from his hands. For the first time in his long reign, the Emperor of the Drathan Empire knew fear. Unit 7 stepped forward, towering over him. It looked down at the being who had enslaved it, who had turned it into a weapon, and for a moment, Tarek thought it might kill him, thought they all might. But Unit 7 simply reached down and picked up the Emperor's ceremonial blade. It turned and walked toward Tarek, offering the weapon hilt first. Tarek stared at it, confused. "What?" Unit 7 pointed at the blade, then at the console, then at its own head, the neural implant, the failsafe that was still counting down, still trying to execute the termination protocol. Understanding flooded through Tarek. "You want me to cut it out?" A nod. "I'm not a surgeon. I could kill you." Unit 7 met his eyes, and Tarek saw the answer there. Better to die free than live in chains. "All right," Tarek said quietly. "I'll try." He took the blade and moved to the console, accessing the medical subroutines. The anatomy of the Sentinels appeared on screen. Horrifying schematics showing where the implants had been embedded, how they'd been wired directly into the brainstem and spinal column. Removing them was supposed to be impossible without killing the host. The Empire had made sure of that. But Tarek studied the diagrams, his mechanical mind breaking down the problem into components. The implants had power sources, Relay nodes, connection points. If he could sever the right connections, if he could isolate the fail-safe circuits before they detonated. "I need someone to hold it still," he said. "This is going to hurt." Two other Sentinels moved forward, gripping Unit 7's shoulders. Unit 7 knelt, bowing its head to expose the base of its skull. Tarek could see the implant there, a dark mass of wires and circuitry embedded in flesh that had scarred over and over again from repeated surgeries. His hands trembled as he raised the blade. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He cut. Unit 7's scream echoed through the bay, but it didn't move. The other Sentinels held it firm as Tarek worked, his hands slick with blood, the blade cutting through scar tissue and wire with desperate precision. He found the power coupling and severed it, found the fail-safe trigger and pried it loose. The implant sparked and died, its lights fading to black. Tarek pulled the dead device free and threw it across the bay. It clattered against the floor, smoking. Unit 7 slumped forward, breathing hard. For a long moment it didn't move. Tarek feared he'd killed it after all. Then, slowly, it raised its head. Its eyes were clear, unclouded by pain for the first time in years. He looked at Tarek and smiled. Not a human smile, its face wasn't built for that anymore, but unmistakably a smile. "We need to do the others," Tarek said, his voice thick. "All of them. Before the failsafes trigger." Unit 7 stood and gathered the other Sentinels. One by one they knelt before Tarek. One by one he cut the implants free. Each surgery was faster than the last, as he learned the anatomy, found the patterns. Blood soaked his coveralls. His arms ached, but he didn't stop. By the time he removed the last implant, the bay had gone quiet. The guards were dead or had fled. The Emperor lay unconscious against a bulkhead, restrained by chains that had once held the Sentinels themselves. 30 freed slaves stood in Bay 7, looking at each other with eyes that finally saw clearly. And in the center of them all stood a human mechanic, holding a bloody blade, realizing that everything had changed. "What do we do now?" Tarek asked quietly. Unit 7 picked up a Drathan communication device and pressed it into Tarek's hands. Then it pointed upward, toward the station's communication array, toward the galaxy beyond. Tarek understood. "You want to tell everyone. You want the galaxy to know what happened here." A nod. Then Unit 7 gestured to itself, to the other Sentinels, and finally to Tarek. "Together. Together," Tarek agreed, feeling something fierce and bright burning in his chest. "Let's show them that nobody is property. Not anymore." The rebellion had begun with one mechanic and one act of compassion, but it would end with the whole galaxy watching, and the Empire would never be the same. Tarek had never imagined he would stand in the command center of an Imperial station, surrounded by freed Sentinels, preparing to broadcast a message that would shake the foundations of the Drathan Empire. Yet here he was, his blood-stained hands hovering over the communication console, trying to figure out exactly what to say. The command center was a vast chamber of gleaming metal and holographic displays, designed to coordinate traffic across dozens of star systems. Now it was silent except for the hum of equipment and the heavy breathing of the Sentinels positioned at every entrance. They'd secured the station deck by deck, overwhelming the remaining guards with sheer force and newfound coordination. Most of the Drathan personnel had retreated to the lower levels or evacuated entirely. The humans and other maintenance workers had been evacuated to safety at Tarek's insistence. Only the command crew remained, bound and guarded, watching in disbelief as their world order collapsed around them. Unit 7 stood beside Tarek, its scarred hand resting gently on his shoulder. The touch was almost reverent. In the hours since the implants had been removed, the Sentinels had begun to rediscover aspects of themselves they'd thought lost forever. Small gestures, expressions, the beginning of communication beyond violence and obedience. "I don't know what to say," Tarek admitted, staring at the console. "How do I explain this? How do I make them understand?" Unit 7 reached past him and activated the recording interface. The screen lit up with a blinking red indicator. They were live across every Imperial channel, every relay station, every military vessel within 100 light years. Billions would see this message. Tarek took a deep breath and faced the camera. "My name is Tarek Voss. I'm a human, a mechanic, worked on Kirvosh Station. I'm nobody special, nobody important. The Empire would tell you I'm barely worth noticing." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But I saw something the Empire didn't want anyone to see. I saw what they did to create the Sentinels." Behind him, the 30 freed Sentinels moved into view of the camera, their scarred faces, their biomechanical bodies, their eyes that held so much pain and so much hope. "These aren't weapons," Tarek continued, his voice growing stronger. Their people. They were taken from their worlds, from their families. They were tortured, mutilated, and enslaved. Neural implants were forced into their brains, implants that caused constant pain to ensure obedience. The Empire called them Sentinels, called them perfect soldiers, but they were prisoners, slaves who couldn't even scream. One of the bound Drathan officers spoke up, his voice dripping with contempt. "You don't understand what you've done, human. The Sentinels were created to protect the Empire, to maintain order across 1,000 worlds. Without them, the Empire will have to fight its own wars," Tarek interrupted. "It will have to face the consequences of its own cruelty, and that terrifies you, doesn't it?" The officer fell silent. Tarek turned back to the camera. "I'm not a soldier. I'm not a revolutionary. I just couldn't stand by and watch sentient beings tortured. So I modified their neural implants. I gave them time to think, to remember who they were. And when they had that time, they made a choice. They chose freedom." Unit 7 stepped forward, placing itself directly in front of the camera. It opened its mouth, and for the first time since its conversion, it spoke. The voice was broken, rasping, damaged by years of disuse and the removal of vocal inhibitors, but it was real. "We remember." Each word was a struggle. "We remember our names, our homes. We remember what we were before." Other Sentinels joined in, their voices creating a chorus of broken syllables and fragmented words. Some could barely speak at all, but the message was clear. They were reclaiming their identities, their humanity, or whatever equivalent their species possessed. "The Emperor is here," Tarek said. "We have him in custody. We're not going to kill him. We're not going to torture him. We're going to do something the Empire never does. We're going to give him a trial, a fair one. And we're going to let the galaxy decide what justice looks like." He gestured to Unit 7. "But first we're going to tell their stories, every single one of them. We're going to show the galaxy what the Drathan Empire really is, what it does to maintain its power." The camera feed split into multiple screens as Sentinels across the command center activated recording devices. One by one, they began to speak. Their stories poured out in halting words and raw emotion. "I was a farmer. The Drathans came, took me, said I was a genetic match. My family, I don't know if they live. I was a soldier, different army, captured. They said, convert or die. I thought I chose life. I was a child. They took children. So many children." Tarek watched the feeds, his heart breaking with each confession. He hadn't known, hadn't understood the full scope of what had been done. Some Sentinels had been prisoners of war. Others had been civilians taken in raids. Some had volunteered, lied to about what the program entailed, only to be trapped once the conversion began. All of them had been betrayed by an empire that saw them as resources, not lives. The broadcast continued for 3 hours, 3 hours of testimony, of faces showing scars and tears and rage, 3 hours that the entire galaxy watched, unable to look away. When it finally ended, Tarek returned to the main camera. He looked exhausted, his face pale, his hands still trembling from the surgeries he'd performed. "I don't know what happens next," he said quietly. "I don't know if the Empire will negotiate or if they'll send their fleets to destroy this station and everyone on it. But I do know this, the truth is out now. Everyone knows what was done here, and you can't put that knowledge back in the box." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "To any other Sentinels out there in the Empire's service, know that you can be freed. The neural implants can be removed. You don't have to be slaves anymore. And to anyone else being oppressed by the Empire, by any empire, know that resistance is possible. Change is possible. It starts with one person refusing to accept cruelty as normal." Unit 7 moved beside him again, and this time it placed its hand over its chest in what might have been a salute or a gesture of respect. The other Sentinels did the same. "We stand with the human," Unit 7 rasped. "We stand for freedom." Tarek ended the transmission and slumped against the console. The command center was silent for a long moment, everyone processing what had just happened. They'd just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. They'd exposed secrets that were supposed to stay buried. They'd made themselves targets. "What now?" one of the Sentinels asked, its voice uncertain. Before Tarek could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. The holographic displays lit up with warnings, showing multiple signatures appearing at the edge of the system. Ships, dozens of them, all bearing Imperial markings. "They're here," one of the Drathan officers said. a note of satisfaction in his voice. "The fleet. They'll tear this station apart and everyone on it. Your revolution ends before it even begins." Tarek felt his stomach drop. They'd known retaliation would come, but not this fast, not this overwhelming. He looked at the tactical display, counting the vessels: 3 battlecruisers, a dozen destroyers, countless smaller craft. Kirvosh Station had defensive weapons, but not enough to stand against that kind of firepower. Unit 7 studied the display, then turned to the other Sentinels. It made a series of gestures, and they nodded in understanding. They'd developed their own sign language during their enslavement, a way to communicate when words were forbidden. Now they used it to coordinate. "What are you planning?" Tarek asked. Unit 7 pointed to the docked Imperial vessels throughout the station. The transports that had brought the Sentinels here, the Emperor's flagship, all were still functional, still armed. "You want to fight them?" Tarek's voice rose. "Those are warships out there. Military vessels crewed by trained soldiers. You can't—" Unit 7 met his eyes, and Tarek saw the determination there. They weren't planning to win. They were planning to buy time. Time for the message to spread further. Time for others to act. Time for the truth to take root across the galaxy. They were willing to die for that. "No," Tarek said firmly. "There has to be another way. We didn't free you from slavery just to watch you throw your lives away." "Then what?" Another Sentinel spoke up, its voice rough. "We hide? We surrender? We let them put the implants back?" Tarek's mind raced. There had to be something, some option they hadn't considered. He looked at the communication console, at the displays showing the incoming fleet, at the bound Drathan officers watching with barely concealed hope. And then he had an idea. A crazy, desperate idea that would either save them all or doom them completely. "We don't fight them," Tarek said slowly. "We talk to them." Talk? Unit 7's skepticism was evident even through its limited vocabulary. Not to the officers, not to the fleet commanders. Tarek's fingers flew across the console, accessing different communication channels. "We talk to the soldiers, the crew members, the regular people who serve the Empire because they think they have to. We show them what we showed the galaxy. We make them choose." He opened a channel directly to the incoming fleet, bypassing the command frequencies and broadcasting on the general service band. Every crew member on every ship would hear this. "This is Tarek Voss on Kirvosh Station," he said. "I know you've been ordered to destroy this station, to kill everyone on it as punishment for rebellion, but before you follow that order, I need you to see something." He replayed portions of the Sentinels' testimonies, the stories of children taken, soldiers enslaved, families destroyed. He showed the neural implants, the torture devices, the cold efficiency with which the Empire had stripped away every shred of dignity from sentient beings. "These are the people you've been sent to kill," Tarek said. "People who were enslaved by your empire, by our empire. And I'm asking you, begging you, to think about what you're doing, to question whether the orders you've been given are just. Because if you fire on this station, you're not defending the Empire. You're defending slavery. You're defending torture. You're defending everything that's wrong with the system we've all been taught to accept." The fleet continued its approach, but Tarek noticed something. They were slowing. Not much, but enough to suggest that his words were reaching someone. "I know you're scared," he continued. "I know that disobeying orders means court-martial, maybe execution. But think about what obedience means. Think about what you're being asked to do and then ask yourself, can you live with that choice?" The communication channel crackled. For a moment, Tarek thought they'd cut him off, but then a voice came through, young and uncertain. "This is Ensign Krolvan, Destroyer Vengeance's Edge. What you're saying, it's treason. You're asking us to commit treason." "I'm asking you to be better than the Empire demands," Tarek replied. "I'm asking you to choose conscience over convenience. And yes, that might be treason, but maybe treason against an unjust system is the most moral thing you can do." Silence fell across the channel. The fleet had stopped advancing, holding position just outside weapons range. Across dozens of ships, thousands of crew members were having the same internal debate, weighing loyalty against morality. And on Kirvosh Station, a human mechanic and 30 freed slaves waited to see if compassion could triumph over fear, if one voice could change the galaxy. The answer came in a way no one expected. The first ship to break formation was a destroyer called the Silent Oath. It didn't fire on Kirvosh Station. Instead, it powered down its weapons and broadcast a single message across all channels. "This is Captain Velkara of the Silent Oath. I will not fire on freed slaves." I will not follow orders that betray everything I thought the Empire stood for. Crew, you have a choice. Stay aboard and face whatever comes, or take the escape pods. I won't force anyone to follow me into this." For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the destroyer's escape pods began launching, small bright sparks against the darkness of space. But not all of them. More than half the crew stayed aboard, making their choice clear. The silent oath turned slowly, positioning itself between the station and the rest of the fleet. "One ship," Tarek whispered, barely able to believe it. "One ship chose us." But it wasn't just one. Within minutes, another destroyer followed, then a frigate, then a transport carrier whose captain announced that he'd been a prisoner of war before joining the Imperial Navy, and he remembered what it felt like to be property. The fleet fractured before Tarek's eyes. Some vessels maintained their attack posture, weapons hot, following their orders without question. Others broke away, forming a protective screen around the station, and still others simply drifted, their crews paralyzed by indecision. The communication channels erupted into chaos, officers shouting orders, crews arguing, accusations of treason flying in every direction. The Imperial chain of command was collapsing in real time, undone by a simple question: what is the right thing to do? "This is Admiral Theknor of the battlecruiser Unbreakable Will," a new voice cut through the noise, harsh and commanding. "All vessels maintaining formation, you have your orders. Fire on the station and any ships defending it. Traitors will be shown no mercy. The Empire demands obedience." "The Empire demands slavery," Captain Velkara shot back. "And I've seen where that leads. I won't be part of it anymore." "Then you'll die with the rest of them." The Unbreakable Will's main cannons charged, energy building in their chambers. Tarek watched the tactical display with his heart in his throat. The battlecruiser was massive, its firepower enough to reduce the station to debris within minutes. Even with the ships that had defected, they were vastly outgunned. Unit 7 moved to a weapons console, its hands hovering over the controls. The other Sentinels took up positions throughout the command center, preparing for battle. They just won their freedom, and now they were going to have to fight for it. Tarek looked at them, at these beings who'd suffered so much, who'd finally been given a chance at peace, and he knew he couldn't let them fight alone. "Activate the station's defensive systems," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "All weapons online. If they're going to attack us, we'll make them work for it." The station's gun batteries came to life, tracking the hostile vessels. It wouldn't be enough, Tarek knew that, but they would go down fighting. They would make the Empire pay for every life lost. The Unbreakable Will fired first. Brilliant lances of energy streaked across the void, aimed directly at Kirvosh's core. But before they could strike, the silent oath moved into their path. The destroyer's shields flared bright as the shots impacted, absorbing damage that would have crippled the station. The ship shuddered under the assault, hull plating buckling, but it held. "All defecting vessels," Velkara's voice came through strained but determined. "Formation Delta 7, protect the station. We didn't come this far to back down now." The rebel ships moved into a defensive sphere around Kirvosh, their weapons returning fire. The space around the station lit up with plasma bolts and missile trails. Explosions blossomed in the darkness as shields failed and hulls ruptured. Ships on both sides took damage, and Tarek watched in horror as a frigate that had sided with them took a direct hit to its reactor. The vessel came apart in a flash of light that left afterimages in his vision. People were dying out there, dying because of choices he'd set in motion. "This is wrong," Tarek said, his voice barely audible. "This isn't what I wanted. They're killing each other because of me." Unit 7 turned to him and shook its head. It pointed to the screen, to the ships that were fighting for them, then placed its hand over its chest. Not because of him, because of what was right. Another voice cut through the battle chatter, this one coming from inside the station. "You're going to get everyone killed, human." Tarek turned to see one of the bound Drathan officers staring at him, with a mixture of fear and anger. The Admiral will never back down. He's a loyalist, a true believer. He'll destroy this entire station and every ship defending it before he accepts defeat. Surrender now, and maybe some of you will survive. "Survive as what?" Tarek shot back. "As slaves? As examples to terrify anyone else who thinks about resisting? No, we're not going back to that. Then you're all fools. The Empire is eternal. It has crushed 1,000 rebellions. Yours won't be any different." Tarek looked at the tactical display, at the ships fighting and dying in the void, at the Sentinels standing ready to defend their freedom at any cost, At the communication channel still alive with arguments and debates across the fleet. Maybe the officer was right. Maybe this rebellion would fail, crushed like all the others. But something had changed. A line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. The galaxy had seen the truth, and that truth would spread like wildfire no matter what happened here. "You're wrong," Tarek said quietly. "The Empire might crush us, but it can't crush the idea. It can't make people forget what they've seen. And that's what really scares you, isn't it? Not that we're fighting back, but that others might join us." The officer said nothing, but his expression was answer enough. A new alarm sounded. Tarek's attention snapped back to the tactical display, and his blood ran cold. The unbreakable will was moving forward, pushing through the defensive line. Its shields were holding despite the barrage from the rebel ships. It was going to break through. "We need to evacuate the station," one of the Sentinels said. "Get everyone to the escape pods." "There's not enough time," Tarek replied, running the numbers in his head. "The pods are slow, unarmed. The battle cruiser would pick them off before they got clear. We need another option." Unit 7 turned to him and made a series of rapid gestures. The other Sentinels responded immediately, moving with coordinated purpose toward the docking bays. "What are they doing?" Tarek asked. A Sentinel paused long enough to answer. "The transport ships, the ones that brought us here. We can fly them." "Your pilots?" "We were, before. Some of us. We remember." The Sentinel's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "The Empire taught us to fly their ships, to fight their wars. Now we use those skills. For us." They were going to take the fight directly to the battle cruiser. It was suicide. The transports were barely armed and the unbreakable will would tear them apart, but it might buy enough time for the station to evacuate. "Wait," Tarek said, his mind racing. "There's another way. Those ships, they were designed to transport you while you were under neural control. That means they have override systems, ways to remotely manage the Sentinels if something went wrong. So maybe we can use those systems offensively. If I can access the Unbreakable Will's computer network, if I can find other Sentinels on that ship." He pulled up the Imperial fleet registry, searching for any vessels that had Sentinel units aboard. His heart sank. The Unbreakable Will itself housed a full company of Sentinels, stored in stasis for deployment, enslaved soldiers, waiting to be unleashed. "They have Sentinels on that ship," Tarek said. 20 of them, still under neural control. If the Admiral activates them, they'll be ordered to slaughter anyone who resists." Unit 7's expression darkened. It knew what those Sentinels were going through, knew the pain, the helplessness, the horror of being forced to commit atrocities while fully aware. "Can you free them?" it asked. "Like you freed us?" "I don't know. I'd need to hack into their systems remotely, which means getting close enough to establish a connection. And even if I could, the modifications would take time we don't have. Then we make time." Unit 7 and 5 other Sentinels moved toward the docking bay at a run. Tarek grabbed his tablet and followed, his mind already working through the problem. The transport ships had communication arrays powerful enough to penetrate military-grade encryption, but he'd need to be within a few kilometers of the battlecruiser to establish a stable link. A few kilometers, right in the middle of a battle. They reached the docking bay, where the Imperial transports sat like dark birds of prey. Unit 7 claimed the lead ship, gesturing for Tarek to join it in the cockpit. The other Sentinels took positions at weapons stations and engineering controls, their movements efficient despite years of forced inactivity. "You've really done this before?" Tarek asked as Unit 7's hands moved across the flight controls with practiced ease. A nod. "Fighter pilot. Before. 10th Corvette Squadron. I had a name then. Seral. My name was Seral." It was the first time any of them had spoken a true name. Not a unit designation, not a number. A name that meant identity, history, personhood. "It's good to meet you, Seral," Tarek said softly. Seral turned its scarred face toward him, and for a moment, Tarek saw past the biomechanical horror to the person underneath. The pilot who'd once flown for a different cause, who'd been stolen and broken and remade, who was now taking back the sky. "Good to be myself again," Seral replied. The transport launched from the station, accelerating toward the battle. Plasma fire streaked past them as they wove through the combat zone. An Imperial frigate tried to intercept, but 2 rebel destroyers moved to block it, their weapons blazing. They were buying time, Tarek realized, buying time with their lives. "Almost in range," Tarek said, his fingers flying across his tablet. He could see the Unbreakable Will ahead, a mountain of metal and weapons. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a monument to military might, and somewhere inside it 20 sentinels waited in agony. "I'm going to try to establish a connection," Tarek said. "Keep us steady." Siral didn't respond, too focused on piloting. The transport shuddered as a glancing hit from enemy fire caught their portside. Shields flickered but held. Tarek's tablet chimed. Connection established. He was in the Unbreakable Will's network, navigating through layers of security protocols. The ship's systems were labyrinthine, designed to be impenetrable. But Tarek had learned something from his time on Kirvosh. Every system had weaknesses. Every fortress had cracks. He found the Sentinel containment bay deep in the ship's core. 20 signals. 20 beings held in stasis. Their neural implants were active even in sleep, maintaining control, ensuring obedience even in unconsciousness. It was monstrous. Tarek began the modification sequence, his code spreading through the network like a virus. He couldn't free the Sentinels entirely, not remotely, but he could do what he'd done before. He could give them time, give them a choice. The progress bar crawled forward. 50%, 60, 70. "Company!" one of the other Sentinels shouted. 3 Imperial fighters had broken from the main fleet and were vectoring toward them. "They've marked us as priority target." "Just a little longer," Tarek muttered, watching the upload progress. 80%, 85. The fighters opened fire. Siral threw the transport into a dive, the G-forces slamming Tarek against his restraints. His tablet flew from his hands, clattering across the deck. The upload was still running, but he'd lost visual confirmation. "Did it finish?" Siral asked, struggling with the controls as another salvo struck their shields. "Tarek, did it work?" Tarek had no idea. The tablet's screen was cracked, displaying only static. They were flying blind with enemy fighters on their tail and a battle cruiser ahead that wanted them dead. And aboard the Unbreakable Will, 20 Sentinels were beginning to wake. Whether they woke free or enslaved would determine everything. The containment bay of the Unbreakable Will had been designed with one purpose: to house weapons that might turn on their masters. The walls were reinforced durasteel, 3 feet thick. The restraints were molecular bonded, capable of holding a Sentinel even at full strength, and the neural override system was triple redundant, with fail-safes upon fail-safes. Admiral Teknor had overseen the bay's construction personally. He trusted nothing to chance, especially not creatures as dangerous as Sentinels, which was why, when the anomaly first appeared in the neural network, he dismissed it as a minor glitch. "Status report," he barked from the battlecruiser's bridge, his 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display. The battle was going poorly. Too many ships had defected. Too many captains had proven weak, susceptible to the humans' emotional manipulation. It didn't matter. The Unbreakable Will alone had enough firepower to reduce the station, and every traitor defending it to atoms, and if he had to destroy half his own fleet to do it, so be it. Treason could not be tolerated. "Sir, I'm reading fluctuations in the Sentinel containment systems," a technician reported nervously. "Neural implant synchronization is dropping across all units." Teknor turned sharply. "Explain." "I don't know, sir. The implants are still active, but the pain compliance matrices are destabilizing. It's like they're running diagnostic protocols, but we didn't initiate any diagnostics. Override it. Maximum compliance. I want those Sentinels combat ready, in case boarding teams attempt to take the ship." "Sir, attempting override now." The technician's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Sir, the system isn't responding. There's corrupted code in the network. It's spreading through the containment controls." A cold feeling settled in Teknor's thorax. The human, that transport ship that approached us, it wasn't an attack run. It was a data infiltration. "Shall I activate the Sentinels manually, sir? We can still force them into compliance if we—" "Do it, now." In the containment bay, 20 stasis pods opened simultaneously. The Sentinels inside had been unconscious for months, held in chemical sleep while their bodies were maintained for deployment. They woke slowly, their biomechanical systems coming online one by one. The first thing they felt was pain. That was normal. The neural implants always hurt upon activation, a reminder of their place. But this pain was different, duller, more distant, as if filtered through layers of gauze. The second thing they felt was awareness, clarity of thought that shouldn't have been possible. The implants were supposed to suppress individual consciousness, reducing them to obedient extensions of the Admiral's will, but the suppressors weren't engaging properly. Thoughts formed, memories surfaced, names. They had names. One Sentinel, Unit designation Kappa 3, but his name was Dren. His name had always been Dren. Stumbled from his pod and looked around the bay. He saw the others waking, saw their confusion, felt through their shared connection, the same realization dawning in all of them. Something was wrong with their chains, and wrong meant opportunity. Sentinels, form up! A Drathan soldier stood at the bay entrance, plasma rifle ready. You are ordered to proceed to the armory and prepare for boarding action against the rebel vessels. Dren started to obey. His body moved automatically, conditioned by years of torture to follow commands. But his mind remained his own. He thought about the order, thought about what it meant, thought about whether he wanted to follow it. And then he stopped walking. The soldier's compound eyes widened. Sentinel Kappa 3, you have been given an order. Comply immediately or what? Dren's voice was rough, unused. You'll hurt me. You've been hurting me for 3 years. I barely remember what it's like not to hurt. The other sentinels stopped as well, forming a semicircle around the soldier. They towered over him, these biomechanical giants, and for the first time in their enslavement, they were looking at a Drathan without fear. The neural override. The soldier began backing away, reaching for his communicator. Admiral, the sentinels are non-compliant. Repeat, sentinels are... Dren's hand shot out and crushed the communicator. Gently, precisely. He didn't hurt the soldier, didn't even touch him, just removed his ability to call for help. We're not going to kill you, Dren said. We're not monsters. We're just done being yours. The soldier fled. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship as news of the containment breach spread. Dren could hear the rush of boots in corridors, the clatter of weapons being readied. The entire ship was mobilizing against them. What do we do? One of the other sentinels asked. Vera. Her name was Vera. She'd been a medic before the conversion, and she still remembered how to heal, how to help. They'll come at us with everything. We'll die here. Maybe, Dren acknowledged. He looked at the 20 freed sentinels, at the walls of their prison, at the ship that had held them for so long. But we'll die free. That's more than we had an hour ago. Through the neural connection they still shared, a plan formed. Not given to them by an overseer, not programmed or forced, just 20 minds thinking as one, coordinating because they chose to, not because they had to. They moved through the ship like a coordinated unit, but with a purpose that was entirely their own. Drathan soldiers tried to stop them, forming defensive lines with plasma rifles and shock batons, but the sentinels didn't attack. They disarmed the soldiers carefully, precisely, and moved past them. Their objective wasn't slaughter, it was the bridge. Admiral Theknor watched their progress on his tactical displays with growing fury. They're heading here, to the bridge. All units, fall back to my position. Form a defensive perimeter. I want those creatures contained or destroyed. Sir, they've disabled weapons control on decks 4 through 7, an officer reported. Life support is being rerouted. They're herding the crew toward the escape pods. What? They're not trying to take the ship, sir. They're trying to empty it. Theknor stared at the displays in disbelief. The sentinels were fighting their way through the vessel, but they weren't killing anyone. They were forcing evacuations, section by section, deck by deck. They were methodically clearing the battle cruiser of all personnel. Seal the bridge, Theknor commanded. Emergency lockdown. They want this ship? I'll deny them. I'll trigger the self-destruct before I let slaves take my command. The bridge doors slammed shut, blast shields dropping into place. The Admiral moved to the self-destruct console and entered his command codes. The system responded, a countdown appearing on every screen. 15 minutes until the reactor went critical. 15 minutes until the unbreakable will and everything aboard it became a miniature sun. It was enough. Outside the sealed bridge, Dren and the other sentinels gathered. They could hear the countdown echoing through the ship's communication system. They knew what it meant. We can override it, Vera said, examining the door controls. Given time, but time is what we don't have. Then we get the crew off, Dren replied. All of them. We make sure everyone gets to the escape pods before this ship blows. And us? Dren looked at his fellow sentinels. These people who'd been stolen and broken and remade, who'd just had a taste of freedom and were now facing death. We chose this. We chose to fight back. If this is where it ends, at least we end it as ourselves. But before any of them could move, a new voice crackled over the communication system. A human voice. Familiar somehow, though most of them had never heard it before. Sentinels aboard the Unbreakable Will, this is Tarek Voss. I'm the one who modified your neural implants. I gave you the time to think, to choose, and I'm sorry I can't do more. But I need you to know what you're doing matters. The whole galaxy is watching. You're showing everyone that slaves can become free, that oppression doesn't have to be forever. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to take that chance. Dren felt something wet on his face. Tears. He hadn't cried in 3 years, hadn't thought he could anymore. Where are you? He asked, keying the communication system. Where's the human? Through the viewport he could see a transport ship limping away from the battle, its engines damaged, its hull scarred by weapons fire. The human was out there, the one who'd saved them. Tarek Voss, Dren said. Can you hear me? I hear you. You gave us a choice, now we're giving you one. Get clear, get everyone clear, we're going to handle the Admiral. The self-destruct, we know, but this ship has escape pods for a reason. Every slave aboard is getting out alive, including us if we can manage it. But if we can't, Dren looked around at his fellow Sentinels, at their scarred faces, their biomechanical bodies, their eyes that finally saw clearly. If we can't, know that we went out fighting for something that mattered. The communication channel went silent. Then softly, it's been an honor. Honor, Dren repeated, tasting the word. It felt strange, foreign, beautiful. Yeah, same to you, human. Same to you. He turned to the sealed bridge doors and the countdown clock that ticked steadily toward oblivion. 10 minutes remaining. All right, Dren said to the others. Let's show the Admiral what happens when you try to own people who remember how to be free. Vera, coordinate the evacuation. Get everyone to the pods. The rest of you with me, we're getting through these doors. They worked with desperate efficiency. Vera and half the Sentinels spread throughout the ship, physically carrying wounded crew members to safety, forcing hesitant soldiers into escape pods, clearing sections one by one. The other half focused on the bridge doors, tearing through reinforced metal with their bare hands and biomechanical strength. 8 minutes remaining. The doors began to buckle. Theknor watched from inside the bridge, his hand hovering over the manual detonation control. He could end it now. Kill them all instantly. But pride held him back. He wanted to see their faces when they realized they'd failed, when they understood that defiance meant only death. 6 minutes remaining. The doors gave way with a shriek of tortured metal. The Sentinels poured through, and the Admiral's guards opened fire. Plasma bolts seared through the air, striking biomechanical flesh. 2 Sentinels fell, then 3, but the rest kept coming. Dren reached the Admiral first. Theknor swung his ceremonial blade, the same type of weapon that had been used on so many Sentinels during their conversion. The blade bit deep into Dren's shoulder, but he didn't stop. His hand closed around the Admiral's wrist, holding it firm. You can't win, Theknor hissed. Even if you kill me, the countdown continues. You die here. Maybe, Dren said, but you die first. And everyone else gets to live. That seems like a fair trade. 4 minutes remaining. Override the self-destruct, Dren commanded. Now. Never. Then we do it ourselves. The remaining Sentinels moved to the bridge consoles, their fingers flying across controls. They'd been soldiers once, many of them. They understood military systems, understood how ships worked. The self-destruct was complex, but not impossible to override. 3 minutes remaining. Evacuation complete. Vera's voice came through the communication system. All personnel off the ship, just us left. Then get to the pods, Dren ordered. Go, now. What about you? 2 minutes remaining. Dren looked at the countdown timer, at the Admiral struggling in his grip, at the console that required command codes they didn't have. The math was simple. They couldn't disable the self-destruct in time, but they could still get out, still survive. Unless someone stayed behind to make sure the Admiral didn't trigger the manual detonation, didn't chase them down in an escape pod, didn't find some way to take more lives out of spite. 1 minute remaining. Go, Dren repeated. That's an order. We don't take orders anymore, Vera replied. Remember? But the other Sentinels were already running, heading for the nearest escape pods. They understood the necessity, understood that survival mattered more than pride. 30 seconds. Dren released the Admiral and turned toward the exit. Theknor lunged for the manual detonation control, but another Sentinel, his name was Court and he'd been a father once, intercepted him. Court looked at Dren and nodded once. Go, Court said simply. 20 seconds. Dren ran. Behind him he heard Court and the Admiral struggling, heard the sound of metal on chitin, heard a cry that might have been triumph or despair. 10 seconds. He reached the escape pod bay. The last pod was waiting, its door open. Vera stood in the entrance, her hand extended. Come on. 5 seconds. Dren jumped, his damaged body screaming in protest. Vera caught him, pulled him inside. The pod door slammed shut, and the launch sequence engaged. 0. The unbreakable will exploded in a flash of light that outshone the twin suns of the distant star system. The shockwave caught the escape pods, sending them tumbling through space, but they held together. They survived. And as the debris settled, as the light faded, the remaining fleet, both loyalist and rebel, went silent. They'd just witnessed something unprecedented. Sentinels choosing freedom over obedience, choosing sacrifice over slavery, choosing to destroy the Empire's most powerful battle cruiser rather than let it be used as a weapon of oppression. The message was clear. The slaves were done being property, and the galaxy would never be the same. The escape pods drifted through space like scattered seeds, each one carrying sentinels who'd tasted freedom for the first time in years. Rescue ships, both rebel and neutral vessels, moved among them, collecting survivors. The battle was over. Not because anyone had won, but because no one could justify continuing the fight. The destruction of the unbreakable will had changed everything. Tarek watched the recovery operations from Kirvosh Station's observation deck, his body aching with exhaustion. Saral stood beside him, its scarred face reflecting in the transparent aluminum viewport. They'd survived the battle, though their transport had barely limped back to dock. 3 other Sentinels hadn't been so lucky. Their ships had been destroyed by Imperial fighters, their sacrifice buying time for others to escape. "How many?" Tarek asked quietly. 48 Sentinels survived across both groups, Saral replied, its voice stronger now, more confident with each passing hour of freedom. 3 are critically injured. Vera is treating them. She remembered how to heal. Tarek nodded, his throat tight. 51 Sentinels total had been freed. 3 had died in the immediate aftermath. Court had sacrificed himself on the battlecruiser. 48 remained. It seemed like such a small number compared to the scale of the Empire. How many other Sentinels were out there still enslaved? Hundreds? Thousands? "The Imperial fleet is withdrawing," Saral continued. "The remaining loyalist ships, they're falling back to regroup. The rebellion has won? Can we say that?" "I don't know what to call it," Tarek admitted. "We didn't destroy the Empire, we just showed them they could bleed." Below them, in the station's primary hangar, a gathering was taking place. The human maintenance workers, the freed Sentinels, the crews from the rebel ships, all coming together in a space that hours ago had been a war zone. Tarek had been summoned to speak to them, though he had no idea what to say. "You should go," Saral said gently. "They're waiting." Tarek descended to the hangar, his footsteps echoing on the metal catwalks. The crowd parted as he approached, hundreds of eyes turning toward him. Human, Drathan, Sentinel, and a dozen other species, all united by the choice they'd made, the choice to say no to tyranny. Captain Velkara of the Silent Oath stepped forward, her chitinous exoskeleton bearing fresh scars from the battle. She inclined her head respectfully. Tarek Voss, the human who started a revolution with a wrench and a code modification. "I'm not a revolutionary," Tarek said. "I'm just a mechanic who couldn't stand by anymore." "That's what makes it remarkable," Velkara replied. "You weren't trained for this, you weren't prepared, you just acted because it was right. That's the kind of courage the Empire can't comprehend. It's the kind of courage that scares them." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "What happens now?" someone called out. "The Empire will send more ships, more soldiers. They'll crush us for this." "Maybe," Velkara acknowledged, "but they can't crush what we've started." The message has spread across every communication network in this sector. Billions of beings have seen the Sentinels' testimony. They've seen slaves choose freedom. They've seen Imperial ships defect. The Empire can kill us, but they can't kill the idea. "Ideas don't stop plasma bolts," another voice argued. "We need more than inspiration. We need weapons, ships, supplies. We need a plan." Tarek stepped onto a raised platform, his voice cutting through the debate. "You're right. We do need a plan, but not a military one. Not yet. What we need is to spread what happened here to every corner of the Empire. We need to find other Sentinels and free them. We need to reach out to other oppressed peoples and show them that resistance is possible. We need to build a network." He looked out at the assembled crowd, at their scarred faces and determined eyes. The Empire rules through fear, through the belief that resistance is futile, that change is impossible. But we've proven that wrong. 51 Sentinels are free today. Tomorrow maybe it's 100, next month 1,000. We don't need to destroy the Empire. We just need to show people that they can free themselves. Dren emerged from the crowd, moving to stand beside Tarek. The Sentinel looked different now, still bearing the marks of his enslavement, but standing straighter. prouder. The human is right. We were weapons. Now we choose to be shields. We protect those who can't protect themselves. We free those who are enslaved. That is our purpose now, not given to us, chosen by us. The other Sentinels voiced their agreement, a chorus of rough voices speaking as one. They'd lost so much, years of their lives, pieces of their bodies, memories that could never be fully recovered. But they'd gained something too: agency, purpose, hope. This station can't be our permanent base, Velkara said. The Empire knows where we are. We need to relocate, establish a mobile operation. There are neutral systems that might harbor us, refugee colonies, independent stations. Or, a new voice spoke up, you could come to Drathan Prime. The crowd turned to see a Drathan officer stepping forward, not one of the captured loyalists, but someone who'd arrived with the relief ships. She wore the insignia of a planetary governor, and her bearing suggested authority, tempered by experience. Who are you? Tarek asked. Governor Shalvara of Drathan Prime's southern continent. I've governed my territory for 20 years, always loyal to the Empire, always believing in its mission. She paused, her mandibles clicking softly. Until today, until I saw what we've become, what we've been doing in the name of order. She gestured to the viewport, to the planet visible below, a world of orange deserts and blue oceans, orbited by twin suns that painted the landscape in shades of amber and gold. Drathan Prime is the Empire's homeworld, but it's also diverse, full of dissenting voices that have been silenced for too long. My territory has resources, infrastructure, and people who are tired of the Empire's brutality. If you came there, if you made your stand there, you'd be striking at the heart of Imperial power, showing them that even on their own world, the people demand change. You're asking us to invade the Imperial homeworld? Velkara asked incredulously. I'm asking you to liberate it, Shalvara corrected. Not through conquest, but through example. Come to Drathan Prime. Tell your stories. Show the people what the Empire has been hiding. Let them make their own choice about what kind of society they want to live in. The hangar fell silent. It was an audacious proposal, almost suicidal in its boldness. But it also made a terrible kind of sense. If the revolution was going to spread, it needed to be visible. It needed to challenge the Empire where they felt strongest. Tarek looked at Saral, at Dren, at the other Sentinels. What do you think? We were created to conquer worlds, Dren said slowly. Now we have a chance to free one, including our own people. He turned to the other Sentinels. How many of you were taken from Drathan Prime? How many of you have families there who think you're dead? Nearly half the Sentinels raised their hands. Then we go home, Dren said. We go home and we show them that we're still here, still alive, still fighting. The vote was unanimous. They would go to Drathan Prime, they would bring their message to the heart of the Empire, and whatever happened next, they would face it together. The journey took 3 weeks. A convoy of ships, transports, destroyers, and the Silent Oath leading the way, traveling through neutral space toward the Imperial core. They stopped at stations along the route, broadcasting their message, recruiting allies. Some joined them. Others simply listened, seeds of doubt planted in fertile soil. By the time they reached Drathan Prime, their fleet had doubled in size. Governor Shalvara had been true to her word. She'd prepared landing zones in her territory, far from the Imperial military installations. As the ships descended through the atmosphere, Tarek got his first close look at the planet that had spawned the Empire. It was beautiful. Vast deserts of red sand stretched beneath skies painted orange by the twin suns. Ancient cities rose from the landscape, their architecture elegant and alien, and everywhere he saw Drathans, not soldiers or officers, but ordinary people, farmers, merchants, children playing in the streets. They were just people, the same as everyone else in the galaxy, the same as him. The landing was met with curiosity rather than hostility. Thousands of Drathans gathered to watch the rebel fleet touch down, their compound eyes wide with wonder. Tarek stepped off the transport onto Drathan soil, Saral and Dren flanking him. The twin suns beat down from above, warm and strange and somehow welcoming. Governor Shalvara approached, accompanied by a delegation of local leaders. Welcome to Drathan Prime. Welcome to the beginning of something new. Over the following days, they established what they called the Freedom District, a section of the southern continent that became a haven for former slaves, rebel soldiers, and anyone seeking refuge from Imperial oppression. The Sentinels set up medical facilities, training grounds, and most importantly, broadcast stations. They told their stories, Not just once, but over and over, each testimony reaching a little further into the Empire. They showed their scars, explained the torture, described the years of forced obedience, and they answered questions. Thousands of questions from Drathans who'd never known, who'd been told the Sentinels were willing volunteers, honored warriors. The revelation shook the planet to its core. Protests erupted in the capital, not violent insurrections, but peaceful demonstrations demanding accountability, demanding reform, demanding that the Empire acknowledge what had been done in their name. The Imperial government tried to suppress the movement, but it was too late. The truth had taken root. 3 months after their arrival, the Emperor's palace announced a formal inquiry into the Sentinel program. It was a small victory, and Tarek knew it wouldn't be enough, but it was a start. He stood on a balcony overlooking the Freedom District, watching the twin suns set over the desert. Siral joined him, moving with the ease of someone who'd reclaimed ownership of their own body. "You look thoughtful," Siral observed. "Just thinking about how we got here," Tarek replied. "A few months ago I was scrubbing coolant tanks. Now I'm standing on the Imperial homeworld, watching an empire question itself. You're disappointed. You thought it would be more dramatic. A clean ending. Maybe. I don't know. I guess I thought revolution would be bigger, more definitive. But it's just people making small choices, one after another, choosing to question, choosing to resist, choosing to care. That's what makes it real," Siral said. "Dramatic victories fade. But these small choices, they build into something that lasts." Below them, the Freedom District hummed with life. Former slaves learning new trades, rebel soldiers training volunteers, children of different species playing together, unaware of the boundaries the Empire had tried to impose. It wasn't perfect. There were still Imperial loyalists, still threats, still so much work to be done. But it was a beginning. "Do you think we'll win?" Tarek asked. "Really win?" Siral was quiet for a long moment, its scarred face contemplative. "I think we already have. We took the first step. We proved that change is possible. Everything else is just details." Tarek laughed, the sound surprising even himself. "Just details, like overthrowing a galactic empire." "Exactly. Just details." They stood together as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights, new struggles. But tonight, under the twin suns of Drathan Prime, a human mechanic and a freed slave simply stood together and watched the light change. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds and 100 space stations, other people watched the same broadcasts, heard the same stories, made their own choices about what kind of universe they wanted to live in. The Empire had ruled through fear for centuries, but fear, like chains, could be broken, one person at a time, one choice at a time, one act of compassion that rippled outward into infinity. Tarek Voss had been nobody, a mechanic, dust under Imperial boots, but he'd seen suffering and refused to look away. And that simple act, that tiny spark of empathy, had become a fire that no amount of Imperial force could extinguish, because empires are built on the backs of people. And when those people remember their own power, when they choose freedom over fear, no throne in the galaxy can stand against them. The revolution would continue. The fight was far from over. But standing there on the balcony, watching the stars emerge as darkness fell, Tarek felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, tangible, unbreakable hope. And it was enough.